Now we're ready. Welcome back, everyone. Hope you eaten and drink because now we will ask you to stand and play and move. Also, that I forgot to mention, there are some things happening outdoors. You have the Starent Avian Society, which is a self-guided game that you can pick out the leaflets on the tables over there and just walk around and follow. We have the tiny games, which were firstly designed by Holly Gramaccio, one of the co-founders of the festival. She's sitting somewhere. Part of the game is spotting her. There are 12 games. Hide around Somerset House, find them and play them. And tomorrow we have arcade performances, which are four-time performances, play, sing, and dance. And now, after all the talking, it's time to start playing. And Emily Koonce is going to be leading. I'm introducing her. Emily is a Chicago-based multimedia artist, writer, community organizer whose work explores the intersection of folk games, philosophy, and education. She's an event producer at Night City, teaches game development at DePaul University. She does a lot of stuff and brings years of hands-on experience running folk games workshops at festivals around the world, including Amaze, MagFest, and Baby Castles. If we're talking about folk games, we have to have her. In this session, she will be guiding us through a curated selection of folk games focused on building trust, connection, and community through play. Without further ado, Emily, let's play.
Thank you. Okay, hello everyone. My name is Emily Koonce. I'm so excited to be here. Thank you, Lou and Daniel and Joe and Lexi and the whole Now Play This team for having me. I am so hyped to be here. Big surprise, I'm a professional camp counselor. A lot of people who meet me tell me that I give off that vibe, so which I take as a compliment. Since I love folk games, I love playing games with people, and I feel so fortunate that I can come to things like this and just teach people all the games I love to play. So I want to start off by giving you just a little bit of context of how I got into this work and the kind of place I'm coming from when I do these curations and I talk about games. So yeah, this is me at Now Play This. Last year I was fortunate enough to be here as well. I come to games festivals a lot, run sessions like this, and I also make video games. I teach game development at DePaul University, as Lou pointed out, and I went to school at the New York University Game Center where I studied game design, computer science and mathematics, and philosophy. So folk games kind of feel like a fun marriage of all those things. We'll talk a bit more about what folk games are. We've had some great definitions today, and I honestly think I might have to alter my definition after some of the amazing talks from earlier. But I'm going to give you my typical definition of what a folk game is. So we usually have four different things that we consider. One is that games, usually the entire rules can be explained by one person from memory. So that means the rule sets are not long. They're not going to take a full rule book for you to look through and have to read in order to interpret to a group of people how to play them. They're something that you can remember. They're simple, elegant, enough for one person to be like, this is how you play this game in a couple minutes, usually a couple sentences. They're usually not designed by a single person or have unknown origin. Because of the next bullet, number 3, they're usually passed by word of mouth. It's kind of hard to decipher where a folk game begins and ends. And also because, as some of the earlier speakers talked about, they tend to change a lot depending on who's teaching you and where they learn the game, what they can remember in the moment. The games might morph and change, and so we often don't know exactly where they came from. And they, again, are usually just taught by, you waiting in line for a roller coaster and someone remembering something interesting you can do while you're standing there and hoping to get on the coaster soon. And number 4, they usually can be played with little to no material items. I liked that Neil said no props earlier. No props, just people. But some do require material items, and if they do have material items as part of the game, it's things that you can find around your house that you don't need to run out and buy. That you probably have I don't know, a roll of toilet paper laying around, or you probably have some kind of ball, some kind of deck of cards, paper and pen, etc. Things that you wouldn't have to buy a custom deck for in order to play. So I grew up in a place that was really boring in the States. I grew up outside of Chicago, and we didn't really have anything to do. So me and my friends tended to play folk games a lot, since that was like all you could really do was like go to Walmart or like hang out in a cornfield. And I didn't love doing either of those things, unless we went to a store and maybe wreaked a little havoc as teenagers, which I'm sure we cleaned this up after this happened. This is one of my friends from high school. I think this video was from high school, of us just like hanging out in the travel section, I guess. And so because we had so little to do, my friends and I became really good at just making something out of nothing. So turning the mundane into games, things like hanging out in a basement or like running errands would be like the time of our lives, since we just got good at what I call good at being bored. Essentially like we don't have anything to do, let's make something interesting happen, which we ended up doing quite a bit. Then I went to university and I started learning about game design, and I began to question how the way I played growing up was impacting how I understood games, since I found that like a lot of my classmates at New York University didn't have quite the same experience as me, hanging out in cornfields. So I started reading more theory on games, and one of the great works that I read, Values at Play by Mary Flanagan, she pointed out that all games express and embody human values. From notions of fairness to deep-seated ideas about the human condition, games provide a compelling arena where humans play out their beliefs and ideas. Which it was so foreign to me, this concept of like games being embodied with values. But I think for a lot of us here, that seems really natural and makes sense. As designers, that we put our values into games when we're designing systems that players are going to interact with. And also, as players, when we play a game, we're challenging and exploring the values that the designer has embedded into whatever system that we're playing with. I also started reading the work of Bernie DeKoven, who's like my games hero. He was part of the New Games movement, which was this movement that happened in the U.S. In the Bay Area. It started in the 60s, gained traction in the 70s, and was kind of this response to the Vietnam War of like the unpopularity of the war and how we needed another place to put this kind of energy of war. And so a bunch of different like play theorists, game designers got together and designed a bunch of games that were meant to be another outlet for that kind of combative energy. The movement was about how peace isn't about sitting around. Peace is about collaboration, competition, moving and playing, and just like moving that energy through space. They revolutionized the United States physical education curriculum, which I think there were some effects of that also abroad, of just like PE is a place where you play games and you get that energy out. This is a game called Slaughter, and the whole point of the game, you have this giant ball that you're just trying to push to the other side of the group of people. So there was games like this, but were really physical. A lot of people usually played outside in a big space, and it started to popularize these kind of like big folk games. And he wrote this book called The Well-Played Game, which if you haven't read this book, read it. It's so good. He's such a good writer. It kind of feels like your uncle is like telling you a story. And it's written in second person. So he's like, I hit the ping pong ball to you and you hit it back. And so you're like, wow, I did do that. But so his work is so good. And it really changed the way that I thought about games. He emphasizes that like when we think about games, we often, as academics, as game designers, are thinking about systems, but really we should be thinking about games from the player's perspective. I mean, that's what games are for. They're for players to play them. And so ultimately, that's the way that we should be shaping how we talk about games, how we think about them, etc. And this idea of the well-played game is a game that becomes excellent because of the way it's played. So it's not the game itself, but it's kind of how the players choose to participate in the game. And that is what it's important about games. Like that's where we get the most value from them, is when we can play them in a way where we're all having like a great time and we all feel equally invested. And so because of that, this like completely changed how I understood games, since he's really pro cheating. He's pro giving hints. He's pro like asymmetrical play. So like if you're really good at ping pong and I'm bad, maybe you play with your non-dominant hand. And if I win, it still counts as a win for me. Like it's not a slight just because you modified the way you're playing to make it a little more accessible to me. And he was especially into, which this is obvious, but I never heard it put in these terms, that like play is consent driven. You can't play something if you don't consent to playing it. Like in class, a lot of times your teachers expect you to like play a game because you like have to participate, but you can't actually play something unless you want to and you want to be a part of it. And so he outlines this all in this book very eloquently. You should all read it. And so that really shaped the way that I started to think about games. And this is a great quote from this book. You'll discover what's new about these games is the way you play them. You can choose to compete because competition is fun, not because you're concerned with who wins. If you've all played hard and enjoyed it, then you've all won. You can change the rules if you don't like them. So long as you all agree on what's fair, you can make the game into whatever you want it to be. So this idea of like changing games to fit the values of the people playing. And like that should be what's at the front. Not some kind of like adherence to a rule book, not kind of any like a referee who's making the decisions. It's just like, how do we want to play? How do we want to interpret this? And so I was learning about how these games are these spaces to exchange values, and then I was learning about Bernie de Koven and thinking about the way that I played growing up, and I became really interested in house rules because house rules kind of felt like this intersection of how your family plays Monopoly versus how my family plays Monopoly. This idea that in different play communities, people you're engaging in a game with, you're going to have different rules and different values. And so that's what I decided to study when I was in undergrad. I was really excited about figuring out what that meant for a game or what that meant for a group of people if you're coming into it with different values. And I was also 20, which is not of legal age in the United States. So I was like, what should I study? I want to do something kind of edgy. So I did some formal research on beer pong, and it was really fun. I had to get someone else to buy the alcohol for me since I wasn't of age. But it was really interesting because I found that based on what the values of the community of people playing beer pong, there would be different, it reflected different cultural values within that play community. And I found that if you watch a group of people play a game together, you watch how they analyze rules, how they are able to like interrogate rule sets, negotiate what the kinds of ways you can be playing, you can kind of reverse engineer the rules that they've chosen for their games to understand something more about the community of people playing them, which I thought was like really fascinating and cool, and just further kind of emphasized the idea to me that games are this place that is really like socially bonding. And so here's another video of some of my friends from high school. We were playing Spoons, which is a card game where once you get 4 of a kind, you have to grab a spoon, and once one person grabs a spoon, everyone does. And we're playing with pens, probably because I didn't want to wash spoons at my parents' house. And so I was connecting all this back to the way that I played growing up and how I felt it was so bonding and so intimate, the fact that we were bored together, even though in the Midwestern United States, the stereotype is that we're like not good at communicating, but we could play games together, and that was really important to our kind of connections with one another as a play community. And so I realized the power of folk games and like bringing people together and creating like a new experience that we can all partake in. And I feel really lucky that people will platform me and let me teach them games. And because I've all my years working as a camp counselor and studying games, I kind of have this anthology of folk games in my head that I love to teach people and share. So without further ado, would we like to play some games? Yeah! Okay, I'm going to ask a big ask from you guys. Could we all take our chairs and move them to either this side of the room or this side of the room? We're going to stand up. If you need to sit in a chair for accessibility reasons, we can keep one around. If you can't move yours, someone will get to it. But we're going to clear this space in the middle before we start playing. Oh yeah. For the stream people watching from streaming, I am going to put the microphone down so I can explain some of these games. We're going to move the camera, and then I'm going to come back over to you and explain the rules of what's happening. So you might get a little delayed explanation while you're watching people play, but I won't neglect you streamers, I promise. See you guys soon. Okay. One question. Is there anyone who can currently see the camera who does not consent to being on camera? We are streaming this. Just to let you know, we have this camera here. So if you do not want to be on camera, steer clear of this camera or let us know. We can find a better angle. Um, Also, like I said, Bernie DeKoven's ideas about games mean that they're very consent driven. So I invite you to play. Do not feel like you have to play. If at any moment you're like, I need to step out of this game, I don't feel comfortable doing this, or if you're just someone who prefers watching playing games, go for it. It's like, feel free to just stand and watch. Yeah, you can't play unless you want to. So definitely cater that to whatever your comfortability level. Don't feel bad if you need to exit a game at any time. We all understand and we all want to have a good time. Cool. So the first, everyone can hear me? Yes. Yeah, my loud American accent is awesome. All right, so the first game we're going to play is a game called Four Corners. I need someone who has good instincts. Feels like they have good intuition. Anyone? Yes? All right, get over here. Please go. The way this game works is we have four corners. We're going to use these pillars. This is pillar 1, pillar 2, pillar 3, pillar 4. You're going to have about 10 seconds to choose a corner. Pedro's not going to look. At the end of the 10 seconds, he's going to say a corner. Corner 2, everyone who's in corner 2 is then out of the game. You are trying to be the last person in. Makes sense? Yes?
Which one are the numbers?
Corner 1, 2, 3, 4.
How do I lose?
You are just on like you're trying to narrow it. The quicker you do it, the better. That's your strategy.
Okay.
Yeah, you want to get as many out as possible as soon as possible. All right, so I'll count down from yes.
Can you explain the rules one more time?
Yes. Corner 1, corner 2, corner 3, corner 4. You get 10 seconds to pick a corner. At the end of the 10 seconds, Pedro will choose a corner. If you're standing in the corner that's chosen, you're out of the game.
Then you choose a new corner.
What?
Then it goes on.
Then it continues. You can pick a new corner or stay at the corner that you've already been at. And we keep going until there's one person left.
One question.
Yes.
Is there a restriction on my end? Do I close the eye?
Yeah, you close your eyes, so you can't target anyone. All right. Are we ready? Oh, yes. Yeah. If you're going to corner People who are like near corner 1, can you form a circle here? People who are near corner 2, form a circle here. People who are near corner 3, and maybe a couple of you head over to corner 1 or corner 2. It's like a handful. Like that's probably good. All right, form a circle, and then people near corner 4 form their own circle. Yeah. We are going to play a game that's very near and dear to me, and like many of these games, I actually don't know the names of them because someone just taught me and I wasn't clever enough to think of a new game, so I call this game the shoe game. And the way it works is I'm going to say, look down. Everyone's going to look down. You're going to look at someone else's shoes in your circle. And then I'm going to say, look up, and you're going to look at that person. If you and that person are making eye contact, you chose each other, you're out of the game. You're trying to stay in as long as possible to be the last person or 2 people. Make sense? All right, everyone ready? Look down. Look up. Look down. Look up. Ooh, you guys are good. Oh. Look down. Look up. Look down. Look up. Look down. Look up. Look down.
Oh my god.
Look up.
Intensity.
Look down. Look up.
Do not
Oh wow, we're really okay, look down. Look up. Look down. Look up. Look down. Look up. Look down.
No way.
Look up. Look up. Look down. Look up. Look down. Look up.
Oh, they can keep. Oh, it's going for a long time.
Look down. Look up. Going back and forth. Look down. Would you win? Yeah!
I'm calling team out the double win.
Look
Yeah.
down. Look up. Look down. Winner and winner? Yeah? Oh, nice. All right. Okay. Y'all are really, really hardballs. Okay, look down. Look up. Look down. Look up. Yeah, are you sucking the lines? Alright, look down. Look up. Oh, alright, we're narrowing it down. It's getting more intense. Look down. Look up. Ooh.
Yeah, it's a good strategy.
Look down. Look up. Look down.
So I think you can
Look up.
probably just talk to someone and say, hey, this is
Look
this,
down.
I mean,
Look up.
oh.
Ooh, okay. Final 3. Final 3. Look down. Look up. Look down. Look up. one person is left. Make sense? Actually, can we turn every circle? Can we cut every circle in half and make 2 circles out of every circle? At the same time. We're gonna make it smaller. Okay. So the person who starts will be the person compelled to point first. And someone's just going to decide who starts. And then play continues clockwise from there. Again, when it's your turn, you point to someone, that person loses a life. Then the person to their left would then have their turn and point to someone else. Once you lose all 5 fingers, you're out of the game. Sound good? Any questions? When it's your turn, you point to someone, they lose a life. Then play would continue, you would point to someone, they would lose a life, etc., until there's only one person left with life.
Once you've lost a life, you don't get to choose yourself.
No. Once you've lost a life, you don't get to choose next. Play continues clockwise. You have your hand up with your life.
Then you're going to. That was a kind thing for me to do. Look what I got for it. Oh my god. Sorry, I hate this game. Oh no, hold on. Oh, sorry. So nice.
Hi, stream. You can hear my voice, but you can't see me, and that's okay. The last game we played was a game I call Shoe Game, where you stand in a circle with people. I say look down, you look at someone's shoes. When I say look up, you look at that person. If you chose the same person, you're both out of the game. You keep going until 1 or 2 people are left, and that person is the champion of the game. This game is a game called 5 Fingers, and you play you hold up 5 fingers, and those are your lives. When it's someone's turn, they get to point to someone else and eliminate the lives of another player. You keep going until there's 1 person left. Once you lose 5 lives, you're out of the game. I hope that gives you some context. That's what you're witnessing right now, in this moment.
That's where the real play is.
Yeah, I gotta go to the bathroom. Like, no, we're just let them.
In some ways, because the game has no, because it's so clean in that sense.
We got a winner.
Because the game has no other dynamics or mechanics, it then maybe forces these sort of playful conversations to come out, because what other reason is there? So then it has to be stuff in like real life, or like stuff we're talking about, like, oh, you do the dishes or whatever. Because there's no other kind of, it's just random, isn't it? Even. Because, and that's maybe because we don't really know each other, so we don't really have much.
This kind of setting, like focused fire, would always feel very personal, right? Like
Yeah.
even if in a group of friends, everybody goes for one person first.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And there's no other sort of like dynamics or strategy there. It's just like choose who you want to.
I feel like if I played with my kids, then they would vote me out.
Of course, because you're the powerful one.
Right.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
all right.
Yeah, take him down. Yeah. Finally, we can take down the big guy. Yeah.
He's not gonna.
Yeah.
Did you guys play? Do you guys play the game like? You have to do like you're playing kick the can or. No, not spin the bottle. But there's like the game where you say like you're trying to get somebody who's it. You know, for like kick the can is like everybody hides, one person chases them, and you come in and just get home first. But we have these very elaborate things. It'd be like my mom and your mom was big and now close. My mom punched your mom right into the one color blood came out. And then it would like at the end you would sort of be able to be like do something red because it would be R-E-D-E and that is the color they came out.
Yeah. There's another bit that
Sometimes
does.
I can't figure out
But you just continue to tell the story all the way.
Yeah.
We're gonna add in some words. And that's how it ends. That's how it ended. Gets to end. But the creative things that we kind of stories. I like the stories.
Next game, we are going to play all together. It's a bit of a teamwork exercise. And the way this works is we're going to, which is funny, we did sort of this earlier, even though I played this before Neil's session. We're going to get into an arc from January 1st to December 31st in order of birthday. Right? But here's the catch.
You can't talk.
From this side of the room over, you are going to close your eyes. And from this side of the room over, you can keep your eyes open, but you are not allowed to speak. Okay? So, January 1st, December 31st, we'll make it like line with the pillars. An arc in order of birthday. Got it?
The border is in the middle where it switches from.
The line, we're gonna do an arc. I think it's too many people.
The talking.
Oh, the line, yeah. No, the line is here. If you are 4K stream for this game. Everyone has to get into a line in order of birthday. Half of the room started where they can't see, but they can speak. The other half of the room can see, but they're not allowed to speak. So they have to work together to get in an arc from January 1st to December 31st in order of birthday with those restrictions. The next game we're going to play, Cooey, by Bernie McCollum, which is a lot of eyes closing. So we'll just have to read up to watch. Maybe you can stay on, yeah, one for a few interviews. Yeah. Or we can ask someone who doesn't want to play it.
Yes, definitely. Yes.
That's the thing.
But is there any missing that was not fulfilled that I could attend?
are
be a
here.
bad spot in the heart.
Wait until there is a full spot.
We had a little June May crust.
I will wait until I see.
Great work. Okay,
I'm
so the
talking
next
next to the
game
phones.
is also going to involve you closing your
The
eyes. You do
microphones.
not want to close your eyes. I ask that you stand outside of the pillar.
Depends what you got to do with your when your eyes are closed.
I'll explain. But yeah, if you don't want to play, I'll have you stand outside of the pillar and just make sure that nobody runs into a phone. This game is called Cruey, and it is one of Bernie DeKoven's favorite games of all time. The game starts with everyone who has their eyes closed except one person who is Cruey. While your eyes are closed, you walk around and you shake people's hands and you say Cruey. And walk away. You both say Cruey. The Pruey does not speak, however. If I shake hands with the Pruey, I would say anything and I would hold your hand. And then you can open your eyes if you're part of Pruey. And you'll walk around and shake more hands. Yeah. And you'll watch Pruey expand. If you don't, you become Pruey. The Pruey will be a growing entity. When you join Pruey, you open your eyes. Before you're part of Pruey, you walk around and shake people's hands and say Pruey. If you don't want to keep your eyes closed, you don't want to shake people's hands. What? Yes, if you are not part of Pruey, when you shake someone's hands, you say Pruey. Pruey does not say Pruey. Pruey will just shake your hand and hold it. And Pruey's eyes are open. Once you become part of Pruey, you open your eyes. Yeah, then you don't say anything anymore when you're part of Pruey. I will elect Pruey once everyone's eyes are closed. Yes?
Do we want to be part of Pruey?
Well, I guess that's the question.
Up to us?
No, you're not allowed to say anything else other than like if you bump into someone and you want to say sorry. And if you're scared you're gonna bump into something, like I said, Bernie Cohen was really pro cheating, so if you have to peek to make sure you're not gonna hit someone, you can peek. It's not that serious. Yes. Just look down. Can you like when your eyes are closed and someone
Tries to handshake and you
you can be like, stop. Well, I mean, like, as a, like, for consent reasons, yes. You know?
I mean, not for the game.
There'd be no reason in the game that you'd refuse someone's handshake. Cheaters. What if you don't want to get screwed? What if you want to get screwed? Well, that's just, Cruey is just part of it.
We're going to get something else.
Alright, everyone can fill up this space as well. Who's playing? All right. Close your eyes. Those of you playing, I will designate Cruey by tapping them on the shoulder. That wasn't continue playing. If you aren't already crewing and you didn't understand that, then find a crewing to join. Okay? All right, close your eyes again.
Find your tribe.
Stop for crewing. Once you're part of the crew, you can crewing silent. Is that everyone? So, learning the program. Not this game as a metaphor for enlightenment. You can take that as you will. If you feel more enlightened, or if you understand the experience of enlightenment a little bit more now that Bernie, you've played this game. Okay, next, I want you to find a partner. Maybe someone you haven't spoken to before. Raise your hand if you don't have a partner. Raise your hand if you don't have a partner. Raise your hand if you don't have a partner. I will be your partner. Okay, so the way this game works is you and your partner are trying to say the same word. This game is called mind meld. So you start, you count down from three, 3, 2, 1. You both say a word, like apple and pajamas. Okay? Then, based on what was said, you'll do another round and try to figure out what you could say that maybe combines apple and pajamas, that maybe something they have in common, etc. However you interpret it, in order to slowly narrow it down to try to say the same word. Make sense?
You say the same word multiple times.
No, you can't. No repeats of words. So once you say apple, it's out of the game. You can't say apple again. Got it? Yes. Once you say the same word, you win. Yeah.
We say the same word at the same time?
Yes, you say the same word at the same time, you win. Got it? All right. What's your name? Rock.
Banana. 3, 2, 1, lemon. Say milk.
You said milk?
I said melon.
Yes.
You said milk.
No, I said plant.
Okay. 3, 2, 1, fruit. I was going to say that. 3, 2, 1, vegetable. 3, 2, 1, food.
We're very close, but very far.
3, 2, 1,
Vegetables. We're going the other way. Okay.
3,
Step away from the camera.
We are going to play a little story game. This game is called Fortunately, Unfortunately. We're going to build a story together, and every other person is either going to start with fortunately, the person next to them will start with unfortunately. So, say I'm in this circle, I would start the game, you'd go around, you would end the game. I would start with fortunately, when the little boy went to the park, the sun came out. Then you would go next with them like, unfortunately, immediately when he got there, it started to rain. And you keep going until you complete the story. We're going fortunately, unfortunately, fortunately, unfortunately, etc. Sound good?
I don't even know where the story's going.
You're all allowed someone to go first in every group. I'm going to choose you.
Clockwise?
I end the story, oh no.
Make it a bang. Well, it might be a fortune.
You can pass it off.
No. Fortunately, the Diplodocus found a great amount of lovely leaf sticks.
Unfortunately, there's a T-Rex machine.
Unfortunately, the T-Rex doesn't have any teeth.
Unfortunately, the T-Rex is very, very hungry.
Fortunately, the T-Rex broke his leg.
Unfortunately, the T-Rex master technology had a famed robot leg.
Hi, stream. This is a storytelling game that we're playing where you stand in a circle and every other person says a line to contribute to the story that starts with fortunately, and every other person says unfortunately. So you go around. Fortunately, I went to the park and the sun came out when I got there. The next person would say, unfortunately, it began to rain and ruined my time at the park. And you keep going and create a little story.
the left, you need it back for everyone.
Alright, I'm gonna let you. You know somebody's out there.
Instantly end the game.
Domino suicide.
Three, one.
Everyone keep up.
Shuts off and then
I love how quickly we went from yeah, just took one pass and it was just like I mean
This is just mob psychology. You know what? Fuck everyone. Oh, the showdown.
leave your hand down or up. The number corresponds to how many hands are still down, right? So how many people are in this room? 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 with me. The turn order would go like this: 3, 2, 1, 7. And then there are only 3 hands, so I would continue to be in the game. If you get it right, you're out, which is good. You don't want to be the last one. So you want to guess correctly and then exit the game. Make sense? Stream, I'm sorry I neglected you sometimes, but if you're still there watching, this is a game I adapted from a drinking game where everyone puts their hands in the middle, and then the person whose turn it is counts down from 3. 3, 2, 1, and then guesses a number between 0 and the amount of people playing. Everyone else gets to decide if they want to leave their hand down or lift it up. If you guess correctly, you get to exit the game, which is good. You don't want to be the last person in. So that is what is currently being played right now. Okay, so momentarily we are going to move to, or after a break, we're going to move to our next session. But if you want to know more folk games, there is an anthology that's on the Now Play This website that was put together by V. Buckingham, who's on the board of Now Play This, and Pat Ash. So you can find some more games there. If you want to know the rules to any of these games, you can track me down on social media, and I'll explain any to you, and hopefully one day I'll have something you can get that has all of them written down. But thank you again so much for playing with me. And if you have a favorite folk game that you want to tell me about, please come up to me and explain it to me. I'm like always looking for new ones. That's like so much of the fun of doing this work is like I get to learn new games all the time. And also if you want to know any riddles, find me later and I'll challenge you. All right, thanks.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, this is our final break of the day. 30 minutes to get coffee, water has just been refilled, to play the games that we have inside that have been made by the students from UCL, LCC, and Camberwell University. And as I told you, Tiny Games Outside and the Strandavian. And just relax for 30 minutes and come back. Thank you so much.
would have to have.
Are we talking about how long the microphone cables are, or?
I'm good.
But like, do we reach everybody with the microphone? Does it? Oh, so this is the maximum. We can reach here.
Okay, should we all scoot down?
Oh, there's more. Yes, then we can make it to the end. Perfect.
Sorry. Power cord.
Maybe I'll put this here so then we don't have a cable mess. Who else is
Okay.
coming to the front?
Sorry? I think we don't have to sit next to each other.
We don't have to sit. So.
Yeah, that's true. So next to you may, if you like. I'm feeling awkward here in my own.
Yeah, Pedro is also coming.
Yeah,
Lujan
Pedro.
is also coming. Lujan wanted to join too, no?
Yeah.
And then perfect. And then
Yeah.
I'm
And-
saying the other side with the other microphone. I think this is a good idea.
Yeah, we can
Can work.
maybe take a seat. We keep standing or take the.
Right here, is this okay?
Yeah, sure.
Awesome.
Okay. How do we start? Do we start? Okay. Okay. But I think I'm not amplified, am I? Hello, hello. My voice is meek, so. Hello? Can you hear me? Is it working? Is it okay? Yeah? Okay. Okay, guys. I'm happy that all of you stayed after our exhausting play session for our final session of the day. And let me just start quickly by thanking Lujan and the team for inviting us from the CGL for the second time to co-create this academic day together with David. So thanks for having us. Yeah, and I'm really happy that we got this lineup of fantastic speakers today to tackle the complex topic of folk games from various perspectives. And as a closing session, Ruth and I thought it would be best to bring these different perspectives in an open conversation, especially since the terrain of folk games isn't already charted, and it's a very complex, dare I say, uneven one. For example.
Yeah, so we wanted to pick up a few of the threads that were brought up today, and we thought about a few different issues that would be interesting to discuss beforehand, because we knew a little bit about your talks. And so one thing we were thinking about is what makes a game folk, because for some games it's easy, but for some games we might want to think about how can we bring a certain aspect that we like about a folk game into some other games. We were thinking about like the different aspects about folk games that you mentioned in your talks, that were like community, collaboration, making your own rules or adapting rules. The non-commercial aspect was one that was brought up by a few people today. Also the question of whether you need props or material items, or what is like the requirement, and the question of shared authorships and who actually writes these stories. Is it about the story, or is it about different ways of interacting with each other? These are kind of the questions we want to dive in today. But this is just what we would be interested in. We are also very much interested in following up with some questions that were not answered today and bringing in your questions. So we're gonna hit off with one or two questions and then see whether you anybody wants to jump in and and take it from there.
Yeah, perfect. So maybe we start with a term. Folk games, or maybe even folk, because like when we started the conversation about the creation of this day, you already had chosen the topic of the conference, And I remember we started by thinking about what is a folk game or what is folk, and quickly arriving that in different countries or different languages there are certain elements associated with this term, and yeah, we had a lengthy discussion about the term itself. So maybe going back to that, Lujan, to start off us, how did you arrive at the idea of doing folk games? So what do you associate with the term folk?
Thank you. So I had this idea, like from many years ago, back in 2012. I read Douglas Wilson PhD thesis on designing games, disruptive games, I think it's called. And I was talking to him to ask him if we could share it now, and he said, actually no, because I don't agree with a lot of what I wrote back then. But what really stuck with me was this idea of togetherness. He was introducing this concept of having fun together while also annoying the other, and this reappropriation of the rules, this idea of community behind games. And that was my first approach of the idea of folk games. And thinking about what No Place This does and what all this kind of festival does about really changing the rules of games and going beyond and having these communities working together and getting together and enjoying this time. So folk games came like a natural thing to do. But when I approached it friends, it was interesting because when I was talking to game designers, they were instantly thinking about this kind of game, Johann Sebastian Joust or Ninja or all these games that we were playing with Emily. But then I was talking with friends from the academia, and they were going on to what you were talking, right? So this other idea, an indigenous game, an appropriation from this other side. So I said, let's open the conversation and let's think and talk and discuss what do we believe and what do we understand for folk games today.
Thanks. So, how do we want to play it, Ruth? Do we take turns, or you see we really practiced that a lot before?
Well, to this particular one, I would be actually very interested in, because like a lot of you came with some kind of definition of a folk game in the beginning, but then you heard also each other's input. So maybe I would be very interested in around now, what do you consider like the most important lessons we can take from folk games? Or what are the most important aspects of a folk game after this day? Who wants to start? Nobody will be forced to say something, but
Well, I gave my definition a little bit ago, and I do think all of those hold true, but I guess one of the biggest takeaways I had from today was in Neil's talking about how the folk games change often. I think that is an important feature of them, and that's one that I hadn't like put into the formal definition. And if you notice in my definition, every clause started with usually, since it's so hard to pin them down, and that's kind of the fun of a folk game is like there's almost no necessary conditions, and so maybe adding the fact that they change as one of the necessary conditions like solves that problem. But yeah, I would say having that they usually change, they often change, and that kind of ties everything together, I think, in how I've been conceptualizing folk games.
Yeah, so I actually, I guess I want to push back against what I said slightly in that regard, because I was talking to, I'm sorry, I completely forgot your name. Tough. Who was telling me about some games you've played that are actually like kind of ritualized and Okay. I have now forgotten where I was. Yeah. There we go. Okay. Yes. So Toph was telling me about some games he's played and that are very kind of ritualized and like these very like specific communities where the rules actually don't change, and that's kind of part of the point. So I guess, yeah, I guess what I'd say is that my definition like is maybe not, well, it was never meant to be a rigid definition, but I think also like the idea that rules change is only part true, I guess. Usually rules change.
Anybody else wants to add?
Yeah, part of the way in which I was also thinking about folk games when we were talking about it, and we were putting a lot of these talks together, was also trying to get away from thinking about folk games as something that is a relic of the past, you know what I mean? And something that we associate as not being something that's currently being enacted in contemporary culture. And I mean, I have a cultural studies background, so I often think of folk games as having really strong connections to regional, regions, maybe not nations, but regions, and how they exist in, definitely in contrast with how we often think of nations. Because I think folk games and folk culture predates our understanding of the nation and the nation state, even though we have this tendency to categorize games through nationalities and nations. I like to think of folk games as being very much connected with everyday culture and how we often associate everyday culture, so they can also kind of mess with and problematize the notion of a game kind of existing outside of everyday culture. If you want to throw on different game definitions and stuff like that, we won't get into that right now. But I do like think of folk games as having strong connections with the everyday. And then I also like thinking of folk games as, being a constant process in terms of it having complicated relationships with power. I mean, they can often be very, very resistant in many ways. They can have different takes on politics. And in many ways, they're often intimately connected with everyday people, and how everyday people, when they're playing, not only create games and new experiences, but they're also actively creating culture, whatever culture is. But that's how I think.
And I want to add something. We have an online section on the site, sharing links to demos and games. And one of the collaborations that we have is from Chad Toprak and Helen Kwok, and they are sharing games from their families and their tradition and their countries. And one thing is that when I was reading those games, I was saying, okay, I was playing the same games with a different game back in Argentina. So there's something about folk games that they are shared across countries, different name, but same spirit. Perhaps different rules, and perhaps not, because you were saying this, Simon says, in different ways. But sometimes it's the same rule, same rule, and different name.
I want to add to that note, making a dialogism with you spoke, taking Mikhail Bakhtin ideas. So I think folk games also related to being open to the different, right? To playing other type of games that are not, we do not know the rules of those games. It's somehow this perspective of being open to the otherness, and be open to play, to, as you said, accept to play, and have the consent, and sharing and asking the consent to participate in this invisible set of social rules that are not sometimes said with the oral language, but sometimes with your body language. If you close yourself on that dynamics, it seems you do not want to play, and so on. So I think folk games also related, making some relation to the my speech earlier, to being open to the different and playing by all the new rules. Yes, that's what I wanted to add.
I think I would already open up at this point. Does anybody have any questions regarding the folk term game? Yeah.
Yeah, I'm having a hard time, not so much with the definition, but what games are actually folk games and what not. And I've been thinking about the game Uno. that everybody knows how to play, but no one has ever read the rules, at least as the people that I have met. And then at some point I did went to read the rules, and one thing that I realized is that everybody's playing it wrongly, like the rules themselves are being changed. And in an example like this, no, this is a commercial game, very popular around the world, so it doesn't classify as that, but it has this element about people creating their own rules, but they do believe that there's the actual rules. So I just wanted to throw that in there and see if you have any thoughts on that, or like these games that cross that limit, or could be, is Uno a fault game or not, for example?
Correct me if I'm wrong, but isn't Uno like a evolution of some card games like Switch? So in that case, like, because there are card games that have the same mechanics of like pick up X amount of cards, like, you know, reverse, like you do it instead. And I feel like at the end of the day, Uno is just a very like streamlined, commercialized version of these card games that people were playing before that. So you have my permission to steal copies of Uno.
Yeah, to that point, I think one of the power of, at least my conception of folk games, is that they're like uncommercializable. Like you can't co-opt them for profit, because like even a game like Uno, that the commercial version is very popular. You can make your own version using like a 52 card deck, which I guess in my definition is like something you'd have around the house. Or if you're me, you carry like 2 decks with you all the time. I think I would argue that the games that people make with Uno, like the house rules of Uno, are kind of their own folk games. They're this like interpretation of the rules that are happening. But like Uno itself as a like commercial product, yeah, again, it's just like a reaching down from the generations of card games. And so I don't know, with cards I feel like that's one conversation that I like never know how to answer, because I think card games are folk games. There's so many different games you can play with cards, but I guess like to me, again, it's like, oh, well, I classify that as like something you would have around the house, like in like a piece of paper and pencil. That's materials that you can use to build a folk game. So I would say like just because something has house rules, I think doesn't necessarily make it a folk game. Like Monopoly has plenty, people play it different everywhere. Everyone plays Uno super differently and are very passionate about it. So I think that's an element of folk play that doesn't necessarily constitute something being a folk game as well.
Yeah, I want to add to that note the following reflection. I mean, it's an interesting case that you quoted, because it's a commercial product that people assimilate depending on the group. I mean, sometimes there is a person who says, so this is the rule, and someone contests it. But yeah, thinking on the anthropophagic perspective, can you say a commercial game aimed for profit, can you say that this is really folk? I mean, isn't it capitalistic game? Is it from the people? I think the things that are much more connected to this aspect that Walter Benjamin, he has this concept of experience, and the concept of experience on Walter Benjamin, this German philosopher from the Frankfurt School, the same as Adorno and stuff. So he has this concept of narratives that were shared by people in the past, because those communities, they share the same knowledge of their own culture. And whenever a narrator comes to talk in a firework to someone, to the people in that community, everyone intuitively understood what he was talking about, because everyone shared that same value. We do not have this anymore, right? It doesn't exist, this aspect anymore. Maybe in some aspects of some cultures. And I would say this is a folk thing. I mean, a folkloric aspect. I mean, we still share. I think it's a interesting provocation or reflection you brought on thinking on folk, right? What is folk? Folk connects to what? Folklore, right? Folk from auf Deutsch, people, right? Volk, right? Yeah, I'm doing a B1 of German. I'm Brazilian. Did I pronounce it correctly? Just kidding.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. So yeah, just to make another dialogism with your reflection is can you say that Uno is a folk game? I would disagree to this idea. I mean, or it has aspects of folk game, but foreplay. Yes.
I mean, it's a strong thesis, so anyone who wants to contest that.
Not directly contested, but my feeling is that one of the things that makes it difficult, I guess, to talk about folk games is that we are maybe actually talking about our world of completely commodified play, and we actually want to talk about a world where huge industries are extracting profit from people playing, which is a very strange thing, and that actually thinking about folk games might help us understand that, and that you're using this as a kind of placeholder for everything else, that is kind of on the sidelines, or that hasn't been sucked into this kind of giant uniform machine. That's capitalism. Sorry to be that guy, but I do think it's important to talk about both at the same time, and to not think that you can kind of just talk about folk games and how valuable and good they are, because talking about that is already a kind of analysis or a critique of our reality.
Okay, I guess that everybody who put their hand up at the beginning still wants to follow up on this route. And you at least had your hand up right from the beginning. Let's see how long the cable is.
I wonder if there can be new folk games. I think that's the question I've been asking myself since this panel started. And I think it does come down to extractive play and commodification of play, like you're talking about. But I also feel like for me, Uno is a folk game. I just played Uno with my girlfriend 2 days ago, and she's like, "You can't put a +2 and a +4." I'm like, "What are you talking about? I've played that my whole life." You know what I mean? And we're arguing, getting a heated argument on whether we can do this or not. And it's we just played totally different rules. So I think for me, Uno is a folk game. And I think we do live in a capitalist society, so if anything's going to come out of it, I think there has to be some acceptance of we are the people that live in this society, so therefore these can be folk games that exist in it, even whether we don't like the fact that we have to buy into a folk game. I will be quick, but I just want to also touch on online gaming. I don't know if anyone in here knows of Valorant or CSGO, or any kind of online team games like this, but I feel there's an element of this, maybe it's a bit of a reach, but there's an element of this where it's a folk game, because it's I can click a button and suddenly I'm talking to 5 strangers who could be in Ireland, Scotland, France, wherever, and we're engaging and play together, and I think that's quite a beautiful thing. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Lots of topics we tackled. Maybe, we would have some answers for this.
I actually wanted to respond to that.
I wanted to give the word to you.
Sorry, I think, definitely there can... Oh. What? I think definitely there can be new folk games. That was part of my talk, is definitely encouraging people to go out, make new games, make new folk games. If I'm right, I think Ninja is 2000s and newer. It's not all 1800s Victorian games. I think with the Uno thing, I don't classify Uno as a folk game, but I think its rule set is based in folk games of old card games. And you're right, people are going to commodify this. Big Potato Games takes most of their ideas from parlor games from the 1800s. or they like change little folk games that people have made up and are playing to go, hey, this is really fun. And unless you are part of a conference or some sort of theatre troupe, you're not going to come across it. So let's package it and make it more accessible to people. I don't think it's a bad thing. As for like playing video games, I don't know if I would agree with that being counted as a folk game. Definitely social, but I don't think something being social makes it a folk game. Like if you go to the movie theater and you like start talking to the person next to you, that's not a folk game. But I mean, it could be. But I think you can definitely make folk games within other games. Like the famous like one I know is like Mario Kart Drink and Drive, where everyone gets a beer. Yeah, Beerio Kart. You get a beer and you have to finish the race like in the best position you can, but you have to finish your drink beforehand and you can't drink and drive at the same time. Or like Reverse Mario Party, where you're trying to lose, but you have to buy the star if you get it. So it's like, you know, mini games start and it's like, oh, everyone has to stay on the platform. And everyone like 3, 2, 1, jump off. And it completely changes the rules of play. And I think that counts as a folk game. So yeah, I think new folk games can definitely be a thing, and folk games within video games are a thing. But I don't know if I'd call CS:GO and Valorant just by nature of having team chat a folk game.
Just to throw in a quick question to get one thing straight. Is every drinking game a folk game?
That is a very good question, and I think it depends on the drinking game.
Because at least in Germany, it's the favorite kids game, which has a little...
Kids drinking game?
No. I mean, it's Germany, so of course it's... No. It's a game, it's called Looping Louie. Don't know if it's also... I think it's from Parker, so probably also existing in other countries. It's a game of a little bit of chance, but also of skill, where you have to flip over some rotating element so that it doesn't hit your pieces, but the opponent's ones, and you can also play it as a drinking game. Of course, it gets easier. The more drunk you get, the worse you play. So that would also be an example of a very standardized industrial game that has been co-opted.
Yeah.
Not just into a folk game, but also into a drinking game.
Yep. This is actually something I do quite often. So I've made a bunch of like solo RPGs and like these games where it's just take some board game like Pop-Up Pirates and turn it into an RPG where you are crewmates trying to mutiny against your captain. I don't know if it counts as a folk game, but it's certainly taking these existing elements and treating them as like game objects that you can then remix and recontextualize for your own fun. Actually, like back in like 2020, had a whole project where it was taking things like Jenga, Hungry Hungry Hippos, but turning it into like a 4X game, and like Conkers, like the chestnuts. And I think like you can turn anything into a folk game if you just change it up enough, and then yeah, I think you can still sell folk games. Like I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I think it comes down to intention at the end of the day. Like if you're like Monopoly and it's like, you know, ha ha ha, let's fuck someone over, then that's fucked up. But if you are, you know, genuinely like, this is a fun game and we just want more people to have access to this, then I'm all on board for that.
I want to plug tomorrow we have a folk game jam. So the answer is if new folk games can happen, there's going to be even more tomorrow if anyone wants to come. But yeah, I definitely think that there can be folk games. And it's also interesting how they spread. Like, just want to give a shout out to Seb, because Seb made this amazing game that I would have played with you guys if we had more room, called Turtle Wushu. And I learned it in New York from one of my students. And I was like, this game rocks. And then I like met Seb, and Seb was like, I made Turtle Wushu. And I was like, how? Like, how did this happen? How did I learn this game in a different country? And so they spread quick too. I think that's like a weird part of globalization. Yeah, new folk games happen all the time. They spread quick. You can go home and make one tonight and then just have your folk game. Which I'm thinking that my definition maybe needs to change to involve, I think what is the most important aspect of folk game is like arising from the context of a play community. Like what do you and the people you're playing with have accessible, and what can you do with that thing or those things, which yeah, I think I agree that like games there's like Halo 3 custom maps have plenty of folk games in them. There's all these virtual examples of folk games that exist. And I think maybe it just needs to arise out of context, like out of a context where people are experimenting with like what they can play in that particular moment with what they have. This is a working definition. But I agree. I don't know.
I think then in fact CS:GO surf maps.
Yeah, I'd say CS:GO surf maps, or even like some elements of speedrunning feel like folk games. It's just like taking this tool and then being like, well, how do we want to play it? What are we interested in? And how are we going to shape our play experience around that? And like, it's the product of the culture rather than the product being sold to you, maybe. And I think that's also why Uno feels that way. It's like, okay, the why you play with putting a +2 on a +4, which I've never heard of, by the way. It's probably a example of like the culture in which you learned Uno. Probably has like rules that are similar. There's different kinds of, again, values that of the people that you play Uno with that are embedded in that, and just like is a product of that. And all drinking games are drinking. Or all drinking games, I think, are folk games. I decided.
So I think the thing that's kind of been nagging at me, and I don't know what the clear distinction is, or if there is a distinction, is there's a concept of metagames, where you you like add your own rules on top of the game, and the way, and like to me, like CS:GO surf maps, and one thing I think it was popular a couple of years back. I saw streamers doing these kind of stream bingo playthroughs of particular games, where they create a bingo board with 25 specific achievements, and they would race against each other to tick off as many as possible in a set amount of time, which is metagaming, but also I think is also a folk game. And I don't know what the distinction is, or if there is a distinction. I think the other thing I wanted to say, just on Emily's point on like it's about part of the definition is about the community you kind of create. I'm kind of realizing that. So it's been a few years now, but a wee while back I kind of ran a series of kind of folk games workshops, and for me, part of those workshops was always partly it was like talking to the players and like getting a sense for like how the games we played differed from similar ones that they played. But also part of it was always like I would always encourage people to come up with their own variations of the game. So like in terms of like, so yeah, I feel fairly strongly that there absolutely can be new folk games, and myself and my friend Claire actually just changed the rules to the Danish clapping game just about half an hour ago, and created a new kind of version of that. But yeah, I think like the community thing, I think that's really important. Like that, especially for me. Like I think, like I guess, like I was saying in my talk, like I think it's really important that people understand games as things that they can change and they can make themselves. And I think part of the way we encourage that is that we kind of create these communities and we kind of foreground those values.
Yeah, continue your talk on community and values. I mean, you raised a very interesting question. What's really folk game? Because for you, you feel like Uno is a folk game, right? Because you said that, right? Or someone said that too. Yeah, and it's interesting to notice some pattern on this evaluation. We are here together, in a community to same objective, and it's interesting that whenever we talk about the folk games or the folk, the things that we appropriate to ourselves, not cultural appropriation, but appropriate in the sense of embracing it, making your own, is walking somehow together with folk, right? Like even when there is a commercial game, a commercial game that is used on your own rules, like when you change the rules of Uno. Yeah, so it's interesting to it's important to make this differentiation between what is folk and what is not folk. Can we say that something which is hyper industrial is aiming for profit purely, that was developed by a company, is a folk thing? I mean, it's a question I'm making to all of you. I mean, I'm raising this question. Yes, please.
Okay, yeah, it's.
I would love to ask him first. I'm sorry. I would start with the person.
Amazing, thank you. You've also been very patient. Oh gosh, where was I? Oh my goodness, under pressure. So obviously you were talking about kind of commodification of culture and play and things like that. Oh goodness, I've gone completely blank. I've written it down. Just give me a second. Do you want to go first?
Yeah, I will, because I've made all the notes so I didn't forget my questions. So, So, okay, because I feel like we're steering off a bit. Where actually, I think one of the key components or a building block of folk games sounded to me like this flattening of hierarchy between player and game designer, and not just about being able to edit or change the rules. There was a bit more conversation about the reason of allowing anyone to make games. So I wondered if the panel could talk a bit more about that as an importance, why that might be important, is it important, and maybe what might be some of the methods that you feel could be deployed when trying to make a folk game that compresses that distance.
Who wants to start?
So I guess part of my answer is the community side of things. I think I think Barney de Koven was like really strong in like building and fostering like a play community, and I think for me part of that is not just like getting together to play games, but also to change them and ultimately make games. I think and this is this is kind of my current kind of main research project. So how do we flatten that hierarchy? I think I have found so far that some people are a lot more willing to kind of act as game designers and see themselves as game designers. And I don't have like a kind of clear or straight answer for how we encourage that in people who are like less confident, who are kind of feeling a little are feeling more unsure of themselves. I guess the way I have tried to do it is to take those small changes as like a starting point. I think that feels like a way of kind of getting your foot in the door. If you just make a small tweak to an existing game, I would hope that starts to like kind of open doors or it starts to get you thinking about, well, if I can do that and it changed the game in maybe just a small way or maybe an unexpectedly large way, I would hope that kind of leads to more. I would hope that and again, all of this I think is part of like fostering like a kind of healthy play community and like fostering those values.
Yeah, so in terms of encouraging like or fostering a play community that's willing to change games, and as a designer how you do that, I have a lot of thoughts on. One is that there are games that in part of the rules you design your own rules. Like there's a great drinking game called Cheers to the Governor, where every time you're counting to 21, every time you get to 21 as a group, someone changes a number with a new rule. So instead of 4, you're going to clap. So there's you can bake it into the actual rules, be like, now you have to design a rule, and so it naturally happens as part of the process. But what I found essentially when I was doing my beer pong research, it culminated in I had groups of play communities, so people who had been playing games together for at least 2 years. I gave them all the materials to play beer pong and documented like the process in which they negotiated what rules to use. And then I took away the table and I was like, okay, play beer pong. So all of a sudden they had a design problem that they had to solve. So when you give a group of people a design problem, they inevitably have to come up with a design solution together that's going to be embedded with their values, and they're going to feel more invested in what is happening. And with every, like the vast majority of my like very low budget test subjects, they liked the new version that they had created without the table because they had that experience. And part of that experience is being explicit with giving the players permission to change things. I think if you're not used to that, if you're not accustomed to playing games like that, or you're just like your play community isn't very used to like changing things to fit them, if you're explicit about giving them permission and just being like, yeah, you can switch this up, if you don't like this part, change it, people will be more likely to play with that because it's like part of the official rules that people have been taught to like hold as the, like, you know, this hold as holy. The rules, you're not supposed to change them.
It has to be held a little bit further away. Yeah, no, I mean, I think these are really, really fascinating questions and really, really amazing tensions to think about when we think about folk, right? And as someone who's also interested in these conversations and these tensions never go away. They're always something to be explored, right? Because as soon as we start talking about folk, we immediately start thinking about, does this currently exist today? How is it related to things like capitalism? How is play resistant to capitalism? But wait, capitalism also is very playful as well, unfortunately, and it's arguably becoming increasingly playful. You know what I mean? A lot of people would believe. And it's something that I've wrestled with a lot and I continue to wrestle with, right? And I think it's something we're all wrestling with here. But when we think about how designers are able to do and have their games exist somehow outside that, I do think there's also processes through which things become decommodified. So a lot of us who talk about commodification, we're often thinking about, you know what I mean, put on the critical Marxist hat. Okay, cool, we're going to focus on how something gets turned into money, into capital, because that's what capital wants, right? But there's all these other processes in which things that might have been previously commodified now become decommodified, right? That's when things become waste. That's when things become, you know what I mean? All types of things that get spewed out that we forget about, right? And I find it's useful to kind of think about the other way and how games can also do that. And one thing that I really love about Anna's games, right, about how you purchase a zine that you then, you know what I mean? So there's ways in which game collectors collect games, and they want them pristine, they want them perfect. Think of a comic collector that wants the 10, right? What I love about your work and your zines is you automatically take that game, that physical object, and you start drawing on it, you start writing on it, everything a collector wouldn't want, right? Like you start decommodifying it in a way, and in the end it becomes a journal. It becomes a keepsake. It becomes something that's for you, right? So what I love about solo RPG games, I think there's a way in which the journaling process kind of decommodifies things, right? Like you're not going to put your solo journaling game up on eBay and sell it and go, hey, this is mint, you know what I mean? Well, maybe someone will. Yeah, as soon as I say that, someone thinks, oh, this is a great business idea. But I also do like the way, I do think there's a way in which solo journalism games kind of like, they're sold as a product, a DIY product, but then there's also a way in which the active play of the player kind of decommodifies it and makes it into something that's not really a product that is to be resold.
Unless it's part of the product that it is going to be destroyed as part of the game. For example, like legacy games. Yep. So, I mean, it's also there's an exception to the rule or something you could hold against it. But it's me rambling again. Yeah, I think. Yeah, they look very waiting. Yeah. Okay.
This is going to be rambly, so I'm sorry, because I've just scribbled. So anyway, but kind of, going off of what everyone has been saying, and I think touching on very important points. I guess when I think about play and games, I think about the importance that they have in re-enchanting our imaginations and a sense of community in an otherwise disenchanted world. And I guess thinking about imagination is also thinking about desire and what it is that we desire for ourselves. And I think games, and especially thinking about folk games and what this means, can reflect that question of what do we desire for ourselves, our communities and the worlds and the future at large? Do we know what this looks like? Do we know why it is that we desire something? Do we know why it is that we imagine something, that we have certain tendencies? And I guess if it's capitalism's power that commodifies and co-ops our desire, then what kinds of games do we need to be designing and playing to reinvigorate an imagination that goes beyond this? And I guess maybe it sounds like grandiose or whatever, but I think it's important, as well as tapping into like this idea of folk, is maybe this idea of like, I don't know, radical imagination or even utopianism as just a starting point for thinking, I don't know, full stop.
Yeah, thanks. One easy answer would be, of course, like if drinking games are folk games and we start drinking in a drinking game, that of course makes us kind of like optimistic about something, probably. But who don't know? Yeah. Okay.
That's okay. There's actually a really interesting book by, I think it's Ruth Levitas, and it's about utopia as method. It's this idea that utopianism is actually a process. It's not a binary or a simple state between utopia and dystopia. So I've heard some people play around with that idea, and I think it's actually super cool, right? So I don't know, that might be interesting. And I'm curious if anyone else's thoughts. And do not bring it back, so it'll get feedback.
Now, thinking on a real example, during the pandemic, I think it was a moment of really working under constraints and relying on the imagination. And we have a really lovely book here called New Rules that was edited by Holly Gramazio. And you can see there all these games that were made with a lot of constraints and rethinking and replaying and appropriating. And there was also this other collective, Collectarium, actually, that was taking part last year in No Play This, and they were showing all the games that were taking place in social media and these challenges, and this was also kind of a folk game and a communal play that was arising in a moment of really anguish and brought something through play.
I'm going here. So yeah, like, I think that folk games tend to be a kind of extension of like skills and instincts that we don't tend to get to experience. Like, we don't hunt like by running and chasing things, so we play Tig. Like, it gives this like old, like harkening back to like back when we were like hunter-gatherers. In Circus, we play a lot of the games that Emily brought up in order to learn, like, you know, not to laugh when you're performing, to like try and build connections with other performers so that you kind of create this like one solid unit. And I think if you want to create games that have this feeling of utopia, then focus on that kind of instinct for kindness and empathy, and try and like think of games that would let players embody that.
Yeah, and like in Games Academia, we have this concept of the magic circle, which is like when we're playing a game, things are re-signified in the space that we're playing. So something like points has meaning, but it also means that like we all collectively understand like, oh, we're in a game, so like this isn't real life. And so it means that people are far more willing to experiment with things that they wouldn't in real life. You're far more willing to lie, right, in a game, like in Mafia, which like someone might not lie to their friend, but in Mafia, it's allowed, like things like that. But also, so they're really good spaces to practice like interpersonal skills, to practice things like, as Anna was saying, like empathy, like generosity, all these things that you want to embody externally outside of the magic circle. The magic circle is a fun time to like play with these concepts and practice what it feels in the space that's safe and doesn't have like, there's always bleed, things that you take out of the game with you and things you take into the game with you. But in a way that there's a clearer designation than just like when you're hanging out with your friends. So I guess like think about using that to your advantage. Like, this is a space where you can make things happen that people wouldn't be comfortable doing otherwise, or people are more willing to compromise on, and that can be like a powerful space if you're open to it, to like trying all these new things.
I only have a small thing to add to that, which is that I think the other thing that games in general, but I think folk games often particularly, can be really good at is just helping you just see the world just slightly differently, which I think for me is kind of an important concept of imagining what a better world would look like. And folk games in particular, I think, are helpful for this because so frequently either it's just doing something unexpected and funny with other people and nothing else, or it's like repurposing the props and the things around the room in order to play a game together. And I think for me, that's part of why folk games are so exciting. The idea that you can use them to just see the world slightly differently and start to open up possibilities that you weren't thinking of before that day.
We wanted to take a question here before that you forgot, but got back.
Thank you so much for your patience with this. There's been a lot of conversation around like how like the definitions of folk games and things like that. Emily, there was this very small remark made earlier regarding like the table beer pong game. You were like low budget experience, almost kind of sounded like a slight or a disparaging, but I think genuinely like low budget is like where this stuff can be fostered. The more that technology is integrated, the less malleable these experiences are and the less reflective of culture they are. So I think my interest is going into spaces where technology is absent and trying to foster that. I was talking to Emily a little about the possibility of going to places like prisons and like try and do folk games in those spaces where people have got lots of time and there's lots of people, and like see what they come up with. So curious to hear what you think about that. Thank you.
Alex and I had this conversation, and I'm like, that's an amazing idea. And I think the biggest part of it is literacy. Like, I love that I get invited to do this and that I can teach people games and then they can pass them on. Like, I think this culture is so alive, and it's so fun to study this too, because everyone teaches me new things all the time and like has new games for me. And so I think it's just like continuing to teach people like, if you're in a social situation and it's like kind of lame, just get everyone to play a game and it will get better. Like, I like promise you, that's like you're waiting for food and you like don't really know this person like, or this group of people you're with, it's your friends then be like, let's play a folk game, and then it brings you this new experience, this new shared experience that is like something for you all to reference. You get new little inside jokes. It just is like such a great presence. And so I think it just comes from also like teaching people, like show other people these games, come up with your own, and then teach as many people as you can. And if we all just like keep sharing them, then we'll all have this like literacy of folk games to spread. And like that is powerful anywhere. If I was ever in a situation where I was confined, I'm sure everyone would get annoyed with me immediately, but I'd also have plenty of little tricks up my sleeve of like things that keep us occupied. And so I think it just comes from like valuing that and sharing it.
Just to touch on what you were saying about technology, I think I 100% agree, and I imagine I'm not the only person in this room who's kind of had this particular trajectory where I started off my, I guess, adult career like very focused on technology, and the more I did with technology, the more like video games I made, the more I kind of got, I don't know, like burnt out and kind of cynical, and the more I realized that what I really wanted in my life, like technology can be cool and it can do all these amazing things, but really what I wanted was people. I wanted connection, which is very much kind of, I think, why I've kind of gravitated towards folk games, because you can't play them without people. Yeah.
Thanks. So, finally.
Thanks for the really interesting discussion. I'm gonna try and not make this rambling, but the question, let's see how it goes. So, someone mentioned earlier that in an earlier discussion, that a lot of folk games are place-based and come from like the local, and that got me thinking about. Someone also was talking about too, like playing games with the sand and things like that, and using like the material environment. And I guess folk games are kind of like this socio-material, relationship. And I live in Wales now, and I live near the beach, and I'm always at the beach watching people play with the sand and put lines in the sand and things like this. But I'm also watching something of so many of the dogs playing too, like when the dogs do play bows together, which I just think is really interesting, of like how you can even play with other species. So I guess can folk games be expanded to this like more than human perspective as well? Like if we're gonna, because I remember reading, and there's this book, Waking the Tiger, which is kind of this mix of, I guess, self-help, but also like a psychological book. And they had this story in it essentially where baby cheetahs, when one baby cheetah essentially did a move to essentially get, there was a predator like chasing it, and a baby cheetah would do a move and get out of the situation. And then as like when that baby cheetah went back to the, the group of cheetahs, it would then through play teach this, this is how we get out of, this is how we survive. So that relationship between, I don't know how that stands in a question, but if you have any reflections maybe on like folk games and post-human, I don't know.
So I think you can absolutely have folk games played with people who aren't human. I think we see that with how people play with dogs, right? But I also I think you're really you're absolutely correct to kind of draw attention to the fact that we're not the only species that plays. One of my favorite things when I go home to visit my parents is they live out in the countryside, kind of at the bottom of the Highlands, and their house looks out over this big field. And every now and then, when there are these like really like big gusts of wind, the rooks in like the nearby rookery, they will come out to the field, and you will see them. They'll kind of be on the ground in the field, and then you'll see them just suddenly like jump up. And because the wind is so strong, and I guess the aerodynamics of rook wings, they just like fly straight upwards, and then they'll kind of hover for a bit, and then they'll kind of drift back down, and then you'll wait a couple of minutes, and same bird will go straight up again. And there's just, I don't know where I'm going with this. I love seeing birds and other creatures just obviously playing, and I feel like there probably is a lot more space for us to actually think about making games, playing games with animals. Yes, sorry, I feel like that was a bit rambly. I mostly just wanted to share my cool anecdote about rooks.
Yeah, so my partner's a zoologist, and I think, is that still working? Yeah. So my partner's a zoologist, and quite often, like, I would get these interesting little stories about how animals use play to teach their young, those that have parental care. So like you were saying with the baby cheetahs, it would usually be the parent would be like, okay, this is basically, I'm going to be the predator, and you're going to learn some moves. In the same way that we would play Tig, we're learning these things that they're no longer applicable to how we live our lives, but it's the same core concept of adults passing skills down through play, because play is an important part of child development, not just in our species, but in many species. Downside of having a zoologist as a partner is you learn very horrible things about animals as well, and otters are forever ruined for me. Otters. I'll tell you, not on a microphone. But yeah, so definitely like there are games that use animals, like in the solo RPG space, but they tend to be very hands-off. So it's not like you would make up a game playing with your own dog because you understand how that animal will react. So like you see videos online, people playing hide and seek with their dogs, doing magic tricks for the dogs because they know how they'll react. As a designer, I would stray away from anything where it's like, okay, now pull the dog's tail, because you don't know how like a dog's going to react to that. Your dog might be fine with it, it might find it funny, but other dogs might bite. But yeah, I think there's definitely a space for like, maybe like the dog whisperer like channels, like all these like gurus to maybe like come up with some like cool games you can play for pets. But I think it's more about actually just playing with your own pet in a way that you understand and can like gauge how this specific animal's going to react, because you never know. Yeah.
And is it a question? Is it a reaction to the question? Yeah, sure.
And well, I think it's very innovative to think about how if it's possible to have animal folk games, and I think it's totally possible that when we human invent a folk game to play with an animal and we can pass it on, because usually we say folk game is like passing on verbally without black and white to generations. However, I'm actually imagining if, for example, if I play a folk game with a dog, and then the dog would pass it on to its siblings. It's very difficult to imagine that, right? So I would say it's possible to have folk games with animal, but it might be very difficult to see animal folk games.
Yeah, so this is something that comes out with like animal intelligence. Some animals do pass things on, like you were saying, parrots. Like some animals like will pass on like, be afraid of humans because they've had a bad experience. Like crows, for example, have a good knowledge of faces. They can recognize people. So if you chuck a stone at a crow, there is a chance that other crows will hate you now. But animals are so varied as a concept that like we don't know. Zoologists would never say like, yes. They would be like, maybe, some animals, kind of, more research needed. Dogs, maybe, kind of, depends on the breed, more research needed. But it is possible. They do pass, some animals, maybe, kind of, do pass things on. So it's not impossible. Yeah. Completely, like, it'd be an interesting point of research. Definitely I could see like some PhD thesis on it. But just going from like, parrots and like crows and stuff, I do think that it's more likely than we would think. Maybe not with dogs.
And I'm also thinking about when we talk about folk games, we are also usually talks about not about rewards, not about winning, but about the process, enjoying the process, and which is also very different from human to animal. It's like usually for animals they are playing a game for rewards. However, for humans, for example, like what the games that Emily leads us to play, even though we lose, we don't feel bad because basically we enjoy the process.
Well, a good example of this is African painted dogs. They like actually sneeze to vote on whether they're going to play a game, or move, or hunt, or sleep. And in doing so, like when they play, it is just to basically hone your hunting skills. So it might not be an extrinsic reward, but there's an intrinsic reward that these animals do get from it. The same way that we get it from playing Tig. Like, yeah, you can win at Tig. It's really not the point. The point is to run, because that releases endorphins, and that's a reward in itself. And animals do have energy that they need to burn off, and they do feel these things. Kind of, maybe, some of them, more research needed.
It's just adding a little bit, but something that I found out not so long ago is that the game of tag, the chasing game where someone is chasing you and then the roles reverse, is actually found widely in nature, and there's multiple animals who play that and has this element of role reversal, which is very interesting to me, in which moment you become the predator, in which moment you become the prey. So yeah, some food for thought, because we play this game, human animal, but others.
I find this multi-species discussion super interesting. I just want to throw in also, I'm a little bit skeptical if the very anthropocentric term, folk is like the one that we should maybe we would find a better way for these multi-species, very open-ended kinds of play. I'm not sure which question was. Pardon?
I think at your end.
Yes.
And
okay.
while you bring over the microphone, I'm astonished that nobody mentioned Heuchincha. Like we already had the magic circle, but they probably were, yeah. Like yeah. Sorry. Just while you bring the microphone, I don't know. You probably know his seminal work, Homo Ludens.
Yeah, we might also not reach everybody, so maybe there might be some. Do you know who was?
So. Maybe just to drive that point home, because I started it. Those of you who doesn't know the work, it's about the man as a playing species, and he starts this book like from I think 37, 28, 37. Yes, it's anyway. And he starts it by saying play hasn't waited for man to arrive. So he starts it by talking about animals and their play, and then only it goes on to humans.
Can I add something on that in an interesting way? I want to add something in an interesting way. I just want to maybe also give a shout out before someone asks another question. There's an amazing scholar called Aaron Trammell who's actually doing some amazing work on reconceptualizing some of that play theory from a more critical perspective, and also speaking to a Block phenomenological experience in terms of understanding how not only, I would say, kind of reframing some of Huizinga's ideas to also to explore play theory critically and how it's been used uncritically. So shout out to Aaron. If anyone's not read any of Aaron's work, it's absolutely amazing. Trammell. And yeah, TRA. Oh, I say Trammell, but you may pronounce it differently. But TRAMMELL. Yeah. Yeah. And there's work in that area. I can let you know afterwards. But Aaron's work's fantastic. Aaron's also does tabletop design and is a designer as well, who plays around with some of that the ideas in terms of experimental design too.
Is anyone Dutch here? No, because I probably butchered the name. Heuchincha. Huizinga, everything works. Look up Homo Ludens and you'll get him. Sorry for the interlude.
I just had an example of animals playing probably a folk game, which I think is worth sharing, which is orcas tipping people out of boats. There's a lot of evidence that this is spreading, and orcas are teaching other orcas to do it, and it seems to be that they're doing it for fun. So I don't know. Like they are a creature that has very strong culture, where different groups of orcas have very different cultures and lots of learning behaviour, and they definitely have very sophisticated forms of play. And tipping people at a boat seems to be like quite a new thing that's a craze amongst orcas. I think that's cool. Anyway, that's it.
And the salmon head thing. Do you know about the salmon head thing? Like some schools also wear salmons as heads for a couple of weeks, like in the 18th, and then in the 90s again, also like puzzles, marine biologists. Okay.
Yeah, actually, since we're name dropping, I mean, for Bateson, the whole idea of thinking about open forms of play kind of started with observing monkeys in the zoo and what lets them differentiate a playful bite from a non-playful bite, because it looks like the same kind of interaction. And I think that is also like the stuff that has been discussed a lot about folk games that people enjoy, right? Like this open-endedness that it might be this, but it also might be something else. Okay, you want to take a question on your side and then we switch here again, or?
Yeah, let's do this.
Just to change up the topic a little bit, I'd be very interested to know what's the one folk game that you think you should play in order to understand folk games, or even just your favorite one is also fine. But I think there's so many interesting ones, and it sounds like people have very favorite ones. So I'm just interested to know. There's a wide range of people here. I'd be interested to know what people's kind of ones are.
Thank you for that very concise question. And looking at the time, I'm looking for concise answers.
Ninja. Mafia.
I already said my favorite was Simon Says, but I guess first started playing folk games with Ninja, so I'm gonna join in with Ninja.
In opposition to hierarchy, heterarchy, which is a horizontal organization.
So I'm gonna go with a really basic family game that has a lot of adaptation, and that's Tag.
So first, I was going to say Mafia, but I'll give a very specific, poorly titled name that we used to call King of the Mountain, and it was basically when Canadian children would try to throw each other down gigantic piles of snow that were created by snow plows in the middle of large driveways. So very regional, but somewhat violent, very Canadian but fun.
Thanks. Okay, so I think over your side, the gentleman in the orange dress. Or not, is it that? What would it called? And I don't know the term for this. Dungarees. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, this question comes with a slightly unrelated comment, but yeah, I just wanted to highlight maybe one of the parallels between some of the folkloric aspects of folklore generally that we've touched on today, that I think that parallels to folk music and folk dance, that perhaps Emily and some other people in this room act as sort of bards in some sense, that there is this folkloric aspect of collecting games, bards and travelers would collect folk music, and I just wanted to point out some of the maybe beauty in that side of folk games. But I also wanted to touch on maybe the sort of utopian question that we had earlier, that a lot of the games that we played this afternoon, and actually a lot of the games that you just mentioned as the entry level ones, rely on certain mechanics around going out, or highly competitive or adversarial mechanics. And Emily, you said in your sort of opening talk about you can sort of reverse engineer a game to work out the values of the community that game is coming from. I wondered just, what do those kind of games say about the values of the communities that like to play them? And for me personally, I love the games like the one that we played where we were arranging ourselves in a U, because we're all working towards a common goal. And in my practice, those are the kind of games that I would use to maybe make a point about unity and collectivism and these kind of things. So I just wanted to what do you think? And in that, speaking to the question earlier, how do we then bring those ideas into the type of folk games that maybe we want to try and spread more and encourage people to make?
I love that you compared that work to being a bard. That's so beautiful. So sweet. Yeah, my thought on that is that earlier I said I was teach everyone games. I realize that I've been teaching people games for a long time, and it is a skill to be able to communicate rules and talk in front of a group of people. And there is a certain facilitation skill that I think is important that more people should practice and learn. And it can be difficult, but it's very rewarding. And so I hope that more people do that. I think it just is something that comes from practicing it. But it is something I'm grateful to have and share with people, and share with my communities, etc. So yeah, I hope more people do stuff like that. In terms of those, so I guess more of my work was less about does this play community like this game and tend toward this game, and more what are the house rules we're adding to this game? What is our interpretation of this game? For context, in beer pong, there's some rules that are more dramatic. There's this rule called Ring of Fire, and if you get the corners in the middle, then the game's over. And so a play community that really likes that rule and plays with those kind of rules probably has likes those dramatic moments more, the kinds of highs and lows. There's also, in beer pong, there's a lot of rules that are gendered. So a community that might play with well, girls do this and boys do this, when this thing happens, probably has stricter ideas of what gender is, and adheres to stricter gender roles. And I haven't thought a lot about does this play community like to play these things that are more aggressive? I think it depends. I mean, according to the new games movement, that's like the alternative expression to war is like, let's play something really like crazy, like tug of war games where people were like very physical, very demanding of your body. But I think there's also a lot, especially just like in the design space generally, there should be more cooperative games because it's interesting. It's like an interesting design constraint, etc. But yeah, I think it's more just like what is the flexibility of how you're willing to play. I think that's what can tell you more about a community, because anyone can play any type of game, but it's like, where do we draw the lines about things, or like what things we want to accentuate. I think those questions are interesting, and giving space as a designer for players to decide that can be really impactful, if that's like what you want to encourage or you want to like find out about a community.
I don't have much to add on to that, but thinking about it, it's really interesting to see like performance communities like theatre and circus. A lot of those are very cooperative focused, because at the end of the day you're all going to be on stage together. So these games are less about like eliminating players and more about like you'll switch sides maybe, or everyone is an audience and it's like one performer is the game. Like when I was telling Emily about earlier, it's my favourite is the clapping game, where everyone apart from the player decides what they want the player to do, and then the player comes in and it's like hot or cold. You clap when they get closer to doing it, and it's so frustrating and annoying, but it's great for getting you used to like being on stage and cooperating with the audience, because they're not trying to fool you, they're trying to get you to do the thing. So it is very cooperative, and I think it's interesting that its performance communities are more cooperative, and outside of that it's maybe falling back onto the kind of homo sapien like default of violence and competition. So yeah.
Okay, I see another raised hand at the very back. I don't know if our cable is long enough.
Do you want to
that
come to the
distance.
front, maybe? That would be amazing.
Sorry for the slightly more, I guess, sad question. If folk games, or at least a part of them, in my opinion, rely a lot on like word of mouth rules and the potential of being forgotten, do you think a folk game can die, go extinct? Can everyone forget? And if that's the case, can then revive? Can someone remake the same game by chance? And kind of related, does formalizing the rules of a folk game unfolkify them? Like, if they rely on the flexible rule sets, once you write them down on paper and hand that paper to someone else and they read them, does that, are they still folk?
Yeah, sadly. Definitely folk games can die. I would wager money there's definitely some dead folk games out there, the same way that folk music can die, languages can disappear, entire cultures can disappear. I do think, like, weirdly hopeful, yeah, you probably could accidentally remake some folk games, but you'd never have the same roots unless you, like, set out to do it and somehow, like, worked it out. I mean, like, recently I found out, you know the Aztec game where, like, they, like, hip smack the, like, human heads through the stone hoops? What was it called? Pocatok. Yeah. That's got an actual league in Brazil. Like, this is a full-on championship game now, and that's awesome. So I think, yeah, you can definitely bring things back, and, like, as I was saying with Big Potato, like, selling parlor games, I don't think there's anything wrong with writing things down. I think it's part of our kind of, like, duty now with, like, access to internet and, like, being able to store things potentially forever, that, yeah, we should be archiving things and stopping culture from disappearing. But I do think it should be freely accessed.
Yeah, I think writing something down doesn't detract at all from something being a folk game. I mean, because there's the, you know, when people argue what a game is, it's like, is it the rules written on a paper? Is it it's happening in your head? Whatever. So it's like the experience of playing them will always have this element of folkiness, and like, you have to interpret those rules. You have to figure them out. You have to sometimes set like boundaries in a room to be like, okay, the wall is out, whatever. I think those things are just like so part of this kind of play, that even if you write them down and you're just trying to like read them from an anthology or something, you'll still reap the same rewards. And it's good to have that, like, that archive as well, as Anna was saying. And folk games die, but like, there's always going to be new ones. Like, I think in honestly, the answer is like, can there be new folk games? I think it's like inevitable. Like, someone's going to be bored and it has like a ball and sitting by a wall, and they'll come up with something fun to do. Like, that just will always happen. So I think it's like a very natural cycle. Like, folk games will die, but new ones will come. And then sometimes the same ones will be reinvented again. Sometimes they'll be invented in the same place in different parts of the planet. Like, it's at the same time, like the Superman-esque, like all these things that just like spring up out of culture that can happen. And I think it's just a natural lifespan of games and anything with culture.
So long as you don't eradicate the people playing the game.
Yeah.
I mean, 10 minutes.
I have a nerdy thing to say. Okay. Just really quickly. But even on that notion, there's also this kind of notion, and it's like a memory studies thing, but it's also called healthy forgetting. Like, there's things that we need to forget culturally in order to kind of move forward, because actually having intrusive thoughts of the past can be a very, very bad thing psychologically, right? So I also think that there's something about the forgetting of folk culture as being a healthy thing, and I think that can also be really important too, because to get into the dark side of it as well, it's like when you start thinking about folk games and its relationship with children's games, there can be a tendency to romanticize, childhood, especially in a Victorian sense in children's play, right? But I mean, those of us who are in this space today are probably all aware of the fact that if you ever grew up being bullied for the types of games that you like, right, children can be very, very sexist, racist, very, very homophobic, right? A lot of gender-based binary culture occurs within youth culture, and young people are very, very much, invested in it, right? So I don't want to, be saying the kids are out of control at the same time, because that's also another narrative that's going on at the exact same time. But I mean, forgetting the past can also be a useful and beneficial thing, because then we're no longer ruled by it or controlled by it.
Thanks. I saw two hands up, and maybe we'll get both your questions done if you keep yourself short. Thanks.
When I heard the title of this event, I thought about anthropological studies from early 20th century, which collected folk games, children's games, but festive games. I was expecting to hear more about them. But I was wondering whether these types of collections, hundreds of games, can somehow inform contemporary folk game movement, also in line with the previous question.
I can say something, but I mean, I'm not absolutely an expert in terms of on the folk game collections that people are currently doing, but there's a lot of work that's been going on in different, sometimes people refer to it as archiving and alternative archiving approaches. So a lot of people who are developing our alternative ways of archiving indigenous culture are very, very invested in chronicling games. And I just know this from the North American space, and that can also be very, very specific in terms of region, different tribes, in different areas. So, I mean, those types of approaches are, tremendously important. And while I'm not a specific expert in those types of holdings, the preservation of games is an important thing, I think, for any game designer or anyone who cares about games to think as being important, because actually all games are actually threatened to be lost. And you'd be surprised, I mean, to put on my nerdy digital heritage hat, a lot of contemporary games, it's weird. In some cases, some of the older folk games, in some cases, can actually be easier to preserve than even contemporary digital games, which is a whole conversation for another day. But definitely important.
Thanks.
Hi there. I have this whole lingering thought that's been kicking around my head since Emily's session earlier today, that, and you reminded me of something that I glibly thought of like a million years ago, that house rules are the original user-generated content, and that then led to a whole other thing where somebody was mentioning something earlier that it'd be very funny to charge somebody to play your house rules as a type of DLC. And then to go full circle and, take this as you will, but Counter-Strike was originally a mod of Half-Life, and so if a mod is somehow a type of folk game, then maybe not CSGO, but Counter-Strike could be a folk game. I'm willing to have that argument.
I say homebrew's folk for sure. I mean, but I'm just a nerdy homebrew scholar, so I would argue that like homebrew game development is definitely a form of folk. Not everyone would probably agree with me on that, but I would also. But I mean, this is also me I could get in trouble with my employer. But also saying that there's also a dichotomy between what we understand as professional game design and what we understand as amateur game design. But I think any game designer completely runs over that all the time with their salt. So yeah, I think good game designers are aware of this personally. But yeah, I would definitely agree that any kind of homebrew or amateur, because if you actually look at the history of games, amateur games, homebrew games, folk games, and then also commercial games in many ways will actually co-constitute each other and co-inform each other, because also it gets into the notion of game mechanics and whether a game mechanic can ever actually be owned, which gets into how do you define a game mechanic, but even arguably game mechanics even escape copyright in some ways depending on the country and stuff. So yeah, I think it's a really fascinating process.
Also, like modding, there's just like a rich culture of modding games. Like backgammon is, I think, like 3000 BC, I think maybe even earlier, when like we first have traces of backgammon. The doubling cube, which is like how a lot of people play modern backgammon, was invented, or like what became a mechanic in like the early 20th century, actually by someone who was like involved in the death of Rasputin. It's like a really crazy story. Yeah, this is real. And the doubling cube completely changed the way people play backgammon. And so this was like 5,000 years after this game was invented. Someone modded it and then like changed everything about it. So it's also fun to like look at those examples and like understand that modding is like so part of just the culture of playing games. People like will take a game edited and make a new folk game, or
and actually goes further away backgammon, because it's an evolution. We were talking, it's kind of an evolution of modding of Senet, one of the first Egyptian. So yeah.
I think it's Chutes and Ladders or Snakes and Ladders is a game that was modded, and initially I believe it's there's a really great scholar who's done work on it, Suvik Mukherjee, and I believe it's initially a game from India that was modded and appropriated through colonialist practices, right?
Can we?
On that point, is the Sumerian game, and the only reason we know the rules apparently is because we found a much more modded, like altered version of it, and had to backwards engineer what the original rules would have been like based on that technical version. So yeah, we've been modding games forever.
So we're going to the beginning when we were talking about folk games, and actually this appropriation of the game is this folk play and beginning a new round of games. So yeah.
Yeah, and I think like the whole conversation, it comes back to taxonomy being this like great opportunity to get people in a room and argue, because everyone's definition of folk game is going to be different. It's like was it Pluto with the a man is a featherless biped, and Diogenes coming in with a plucked chicken, and like just keep going through all these like different things trying to pin down what is a folk game, what is a man. We're never going to get to this like perfect answer of like what a folk game is. And I think at a certain point you have to either go, okay, I don't want to be in academia, and leave it to these guys to fight, probably in the parking lot at midnight after a few drinks.
That were nice closing remarks, yeah. I mean, I was probably going to end that. You can see, actually, I think one of the oldest surviving playing boards of the game of Ur in the British Museum. However, that got there. But thank you for this better closing remarks. Thank you for your participation. I'm glad that that we didn't have to use any of the questions we noted down, because you were such an active audience, participants in the discussion. Thank you to our speakers. And yeah, thank you for being here. And it's time to hand the mic back to Lujan.
Thank you. Thank you all. I hope you have enjoyed your time, and I have a couple of announcements. So, we need your help. Everyone that is seated on a chair that is foldable, we need you to fold it and take it to that place. The other ones, stack them one on top of the other. This is the final game. Those that have bought the combined ticket or that have tickets for the evening meetup, you can let someone know there's a lady on the door that will give you a wristband that you can have that for a one free drink, non-alcoholic, at the exchange bar. We have now 1 hour between 6 and 7. You can either stay here, play the games, you can go to the exchange bar, or else we'll see you back at 7. We have Sonaris Ensemble, a set of micro talks, and a performance by Naku Bernari, who is doing 8-bit music. This is it. Thank you so much.